Hey everybody. I was actually doing an expression session and I didn't get my makeup right, so we just trashed that idea. Just gonna run through a couple of things here, stuff that's coming up for people. Run through some things you may or may not know because people ask me about this stuff. All the context videos are on YouTube. The stuff that explains KI, all YouTube. The work and how to do KI is in the Killabee members area. And there the two shall meet. Because in the members area, people don't want a lot of context videos because they're doing the work and they have their own insights. They have their own practice now. They don't need somebody just sitting there saying stuff like this all the time. They might have in the beginning, but not anymore. And so as they go into the members area, they also don't want to be flooded with these context videos. But some of them want them available. So some of you from the members area watch these on YouTube. So these videos are not just to let people know about the work. That's part of it, promoting the work, because it's good work. Want people to know about it. But another reason this might be even more important than that would be context, because what Dan and I realize is with KI, because you go so deeply into unconscious programming, that if you don't have a context or some sort of a map, you'll easily get bamboozled. Your system will seek safety constantly. Can you see that the need for that now? Like if you've seen the map, you know why we have context, right? Because left to our own devices, we will not embody presence. Our system is designed to do almost the opposite of that, self-protect. So the context is really important, but again, once you start doing the work, it becomes less and less important to hear me talking about it. And here's a really cool thing, you guys. You know, a few years ago where I said, I think that the new spirituality has to be, like if we keep the authority figure, the guru thing has to go. In other words, the idea that it's in someone, that it's just someone's experience and that they have it and really nobody else has it. You know, and like it's a special thing or it's not. And I think it's available to anyone who has earnestness and skill, that real desire to be free. All these insights and realizations are available to anyone who has that earnestness and skill. So it's one thing to say, let's end the guru thing in terms of like, what I think about the guru thing is where we give our power away to other people. Like, you've got it, I don't have it. And so therefore we just miss our own experience by projecting like that thing. What's really cool about KI, one of the things that's really cool about it is that it makes the teacher or the facilitator in the end really dispensable, because the third dimension tools are so skillful that once somebody knows how to do that, if I interject in some way, it will only get in their way. If somebody's really skillful in a session, you should watch a session in third dimension work. It's very different than almost any other guiding because it's mostly about showing people how to do the skills. Once they do it, it's about helping them refine the skills, but then it's about getting out of their way and just basically staying quiet. And so that they can process, because once there's skill, again, I can't do anything better than they can do for themselves if they're skillful. There's nothing I can do better if they're skillful than what they can do for themselves. And the one thing that happens with repression trauma work, you start to use a discerning mind. You stop giving your power away. So you're not likely again to fall prey to like devotional guru worship ever again, because you're dealing with the mom and dad stuff. So there's going to be a discernment that comes online, a natural trusting of your experience, where you definitely will stop giving your power away to anybody, including me. You'll see that you're ultimately the only authority for your experience. And you'll become skillful. And in that way, there will be no room for any gurus in your life. There are no gurus in my life. There haven't been for years, because that is a product of not being awake to my experience and not trusting my own experience. The more you trust your own experience and you're skillful, the less you will do that, whatever that is. People come into KI. Here's another thing. One of the main things that dysregulates people in KI, as I can see now, are the old habits that they bring in. So when you get here, we teach you to make the mind-body connection conscious. But some of you have come from practices in which this is what you're doing, in case you're wondering. This is why you get so dysregulated when big energies come up. It's like you'll trigger yourself or some big thing will come up, but then unconsciously your mind is like, I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel this. No, this isn't safe. But you're just quiet. And you're just resting with this big energy. And maybe you're wondering, where's all this resistance come from? It's the mind-body connection that you can't see. So when the teacher says, just die to that, or let that contraction just like break you open, destroy you, let it just come all the way through. It can't, for many of you, because the mind is unconsciously resisting it. So then you come into KI and you have that old habit. So when we do reverse inquiry, for example, and you say, I'm lovable, or something like, I can get angry at Dad, and then a big energy comes up and you do that same thing. You just rest with the energy as if there's no mind there. And so the mind is there and it's like, this isn't safe. This isn't safe. I don't want to feel this. What that does is it creates more resistance when you're unconscious around it. So how is that really going? How are you going to open to that? Truly, when you've got a mind hidden, self-protecting, what that mind's going to do more than, that's not going to dissolve in many cases. What it's going to do, it's going to feel very resistant. It's going to feel like no matter what I do, how I rest with it, how much I allow it, it just sort of stays. Mind. You guys, do you hear me? Broken record, right? Your mind is unconscious when you're resting with big energies. You bring that habit into KI. So from the very beginning, we say, don't do that, because could be dysregulating and it's a bypass. In other words, correct the skill from the beginning so that you can see your mind more. But if people don't pick up that new skill, they do the old thing. And so this is why there's a deadly combination, a really kind of scary combination here, which is lack of skill, meaning when something comes up, you're really unconscious to the mind. You're just resting with feeling or sensation only. That, coupled with the penetrative power of KI, can dysregulate you. So in other words, when you say a reverse inquiry, like, I can get angry at Dad, that is so direct for your system. And your system's going to go, no, very strongly, mind, body. If you're just going to rest with the feeling, again, you're missing this no. So you come into KI and you do that. You use these inquiries to conjure things up, but you remain unconscious to the mind. So you're just, big energies are coming up. There's a resistance to it, and your mind is unconscious. And then you're getting dysregulated as you ask more inquiries to build the energy up more. It's not really transmuting because you can't see the mind. That's why I say, when I'm taking you through inquiry, see everything. Allow the mind-body connection around everything. And then as soon as people will start doing that, they stop being so dysregulated and stop feeling like they just get really stuck and they can't move from that stuckness. So if you have this habit, and you may not even know you do, of you're just a feeler, something comes up and just feel it. Okay, just be with that. That's what I'm talking about. That's an advanced practice compared to just witnessing mind or just resting as awareness, to have your experience be more somatic like that. But if you're going to miss the mind-body connection, I wouldn't be drumming up a lot of energy down there if I were you. If you're going to miss the mind-body connection. That would have been really painful during the chronic pain if I would have done that. In other words, if I would have said, I'm not angry, or I can get angry, and it'd be like, no, but I just don't see the mind. That pain would have gotten worse every time I said that. It did. But if I'm not seeing the mind, There's no release. So I'm just building up a bunch of tension in the body. See? So that's what you guys are doing, some of you, with regard to your contractions. There's programming in there and you're conjuring it up, and the energy gets stronger, but you're not seeing the mind. And so then you're going to have an experience like I would have had, which would have been, that's going to remain, that contraction. And if you're lucky, you don't dysregulate yourself by drumming up all of that energy and being unconscious to the mind that's connected to it. How do you correct it? Like this. I can get angry at dad, or I'm lovable, whatever it is. Feel it and see. See every thought that's connected to that energy. And if you don't see thoughts connected to it, ask, what would this energy say if it could speak right now? Or what does the energy mean about me? And then you'll see it. Okay, just going through some of your comments. And by the way, y'all, the sweet comments are very, very nice. Thank you for a lot of really nice things you guys are saying about the work. I don't always comment on that. Sometimes I do. Oh yeah, here's a question. Scott, would it be possible for you to touch on the violent victim? I find this to be helpful understanding of the separate self. The violent victim is the rage repressor, the anger repressor that has a victim identity. That was me, basically. I told a little bit of my personal story in the first expression session because I think it illuminates it well. Remember, as a kid, I interpreted that the whole world is against me, victim. And like, I'm the only one, I'm a freak, there's something wrong with me. Like, the love, the sex that I like, dare not speak its name. This was 1980 something. And again, I can't imagine what it would have been like before that for people who were gay. But so I grew up with this very isolated sense of deep woundedness, and I was bullied for being gay. So basically the whole world felt very hateful to me. And so I took that on. I'm a victim. And that protected me. I couldn't access the rage that I had at all of you. I buried that. But that little kid was really angry at the world. And as I grew up, that identity was solidly in place. Like in my 20s, I was already an activist in a sense, gay rights activist. Not out on the streets, but one of those that like, very active in the conversation. Victim identity. There was a lot of rage underneath that. And so remember, with the victim identity, even though we feel anger, of course, if rage or anger is our primary repression with the victim identity, that victim identity is keeping us safe from really feeling and expressing the rage. But the violent victim part is that the rage is there. And so one thing you'll see, like with victim, there's just little things that we see, like something we call like nangry. Nangry is victims can feel very needy, needing other people's help, but then they might get angry if you don't help them in exactly the way that they want. So you have to look at that. It's like with a victim identity, when you're really identified with it, you're not open to processing, really. That victim identity is a closed circuit. It's only interested in kind of getting people to agree with it in a way until you become more conscious of it. So your reactions to the bad shit that's going on in the world that you feel like you're a victim of, your reactions are fueled by rage, anger, but you don't show it. So what you might show to the world is victim. And so in some ways it's manipulative, but you're not conscious of it. Yeah, I was not conscious of the fact that I was deceiving people. See? So I was pretending like I wasn't raging because I didn't want to look at that. I didn't want to know it, and I was scared of it. So one thing that victims do is they have a lot to say about angry people, and that's what makes them violent, because they're shadow boxing quite often, because they haven't contacted the rage within. So the victims will have certain shadows that will keep popping up that keeps the victim in place, like authority, bully, aggressor, narcissist. These archetypes out there, arrogance, confidence, these archetypes keep the victim identity in place, because as long as you're shadow boxing, and rather violently shadow boxing these people, and a lot of times with victims, sometimes it's outwardly, but a lot of times it's inwardly bullying. Like, along with that story is like the rage is very repressed. So it's like a punishing type story. It's very, very angry, actually. But it doesn't show that a lot when the rage is repressed. That's the point. So the victim, again, you might not see somebody as a victim who's raging in the corner of a room. It might be very sad or wounded or afraid. So there's the repression of anger there. But the violence in it is because you're raging, and we often shadow box those who are angry or show some energy that's too close to our own energy. And we can be very self-righteous about it because we're denying it within ourselves. We're not really acknowledging that we're pissed, like really acknowledging it. And so there's a deception in it. It's like, so then we're going to shadow box those who seem pissed or seem aggressive. And that protects us from feeling it within ourselves. And those people feel it. When we come at them, they may or may not be tuned in to the fact that we're angry. But they have to defend against our repressed anger. And we're also very self-righteous, victims, because we actually believe that we're right. When I was growing up, I really believed I'm in the right here. You guys are all ignorant. There's nothing wrong with me being gay. You just don't understand. I was right, the way I saw it. So in that, the anger stays in place because there's a identity there. I get something out of that. Being right, being self-righteous, even being like a martyr, right? I'm going to die for this cause. I'm going to go down fighting for this, whatever this cause is. Yeah, and the violence, I think, comes from the self-deception, in my view. When the victim is pointing out at the authority and the aggressive people and the narcissist, the victim is literally hiding their rage from themselves. And they're shadowing that kind of energy out. And that's what makes it violent and self-deceptive. Yeah, if you get on the receiving end of a victim who's angry but doesn't acknowledge it, it's pretty treacherous. If you would have gotten on the receiving end of my wrath, I would have done everything other than just be honest with you. If I would have been honest with you, it's like, I fucking hate you. I'm angry at you. And then it would have been over because I would have just been honest. But instead, it wouldn't be honest. Hide that and make all these really cool intellectual arguments or worldviews that sound like I'm right and that come from like this buried repression of anger and it sounds intellectual, but I'm actually just really angry. And I'm trying to be right because I'm really afraid. You see, violence. Fear comes in the self-righteousness, because anybody who doesn't agree, you have to pounce on them in some way because you're right. But you wouldn't pounce on them necessarily with full-on rage. You might do it with quiet bullying or self-righteousness or just making them into a bad person. Angry people are bad. I don't have it. There are some victims who are really angry, though. They're not repressing anger. It's more that they might repress sadness. The thing here is you have to know. I think that one of the bamboozling things about this whole narcissism thing is that there's a kind of narcissism that's tied to victim consciousness, which is very, very unconscious, manipulative, trying to get everybody to buy into that story, not processing it, not open to reversing repression, and making it into just like the grandiose narcissist, which is very, very self-centered. And I think that's actually more common in spirituality in some cases than the grandiose, because the grandiose narcissist doesn't do any repression work. So any of you who are doing repression work, you probably don't have to concern yourself with grandiose narcissism, probably, because you're doing repression work. What I think you have to be careful of are those of you who have a victim identity and you're not doing repression work. Because there, the narcissism can be coming through and within the victim consciousness, and that would be really threatening to actually own the rage, for example. because you would have to give up your entire paradigm. And if you're really identified with it in a way that is very narcissistic, like meaning you just completely believe that you're a victim and nobody can convince you otherwise. That's what I mean by narcissism. Like I'm completely convinced of it in a way that I'm not even open to really look at it. There it is. There's my answer to that. Tiger, you really come up with some good questions, I have to say. I'm just going to see if there's anything else here. I love you all. As I can really tell from your comments who's actually doing this work, and it comes through the kinds of questions and comments that you make. And it also comes through when people aren't doing it. But some people come by and they're just learning about it. And they're just like, they're asking just very innocent questions. So I'm trying to answer those. Oh, yeah. What does non-duality have to do with trauma? ALT, this may be one of the last. Oh, and then James answered, trauma is the stuff that holds us back from being the awareness. I think I can put a few more words to this. It has everything to do with awakening, trauma does. There's some more words that have come up for that. But the repression, which is a response from trauma, think about it. I have to hold back my emotions, like hold back something about myself to stay safe, like James said. Whatever I'm holding back, yeah, hear this out, because I think we can really answer this for a lot of people right now, if you'll hear this, in terms of what does this have to do with, the questions are like, is this therapy or is this awakening? Or what does trauma have to do with awakening? Here it is, guys, here it is, I think. I'll say a few things, and if you still don't think it has anything to do with it, I think you're bamboozling yourself. I really think at that point, you're really self-protecting around something. So just hear it though. Right, so James says, if I have to hold a part of myself back, then I seriously could just not be myself. Whatever that is, I just can't be it. So I have to hold the anger back, or for me, the femininity. Whatever was showing up in the world was not fully authentic. Because I had to hide parts of myself, and by hiding parts of myself, some version of a false self was there. Even as I did a lot of work on like the negative, painful identities, like unlovable, there was still this thing about good. In other words, if I was showing up where I want you to see me as good or kind or peaceful, that was coming from this part of myself that was offline. So the identity that we explore in non-duality is connected directly to the repression of something else. So if I have to hold back anger, I put forth the false self of I'm good. But also if I hold back anger, the victim identity, see, a negative identity is part of that. By holding the rage back, the victim identity contains the woundedness, the sadness, the fear, but the anger is repressed. See, I'm protected from the anger in that identity. So we don't want to protect ourselves from emotions that are behind the identities. By protecting ourselves and not feeling and processing the held back emotions, those identities for many people will continue, because you need to be able to essentially lie to people if you're lying to yourself. If you're lying to yourself and not acknowledging this primary emotion of anger, then you have to lie to other people. Even if you're not aware that you're doing it, you're just going to show up as someone who doesn't have that. That's your identity. You're investigating that in non-duality, and many of you are missing this. And so your separate self-identity continues because this is not embodied. There's another way of saying it, presence. But what does that mean? To embody presence means eventually you're going to have to get to the rage in your body, the buried sadness that you don't even know is there. That's the contraction. There's your trauma held in that. Again, that trauma has lots of different conditioning in it. But one of the main things of that conditioning is have to hold that emotion back. And then right with that conditioning, hold that authentic emotion back is false self, victim, good person comes up with it in inquiry. It has everything to do. Trauma has everything to do with non-dual realization. It's just that we're in 2022 and we have 23 and we just haven't gotten it yet. That's all that it is that some animals among the human species just don't get it yet, because it's all moving in that direction, you guys. That understanding is coming into spirituality slowly. I could say a lot more about it, but I think that's the clearest way to say that identity that you're seeing in your non-dual investigation is coming in part from because you cannot be yourself. You have to hold something back that is not safe. That's your ego. That's ego doing that. So ego is not just identity. Ego programming is all the self-protective survival programming that comes to bring us that experience of separation. Part of that is this identity that you're seeing, that you're questioning in non-duality, part of it, see? But why is that there? See, it's not enough, I think, to say things like, it's there because of separation. Why is separation there? And then we get to start talking about survival and safety. It gets closer to our experience. Then separation or even non-duality, it's like, what is it? It's really vague, and I think we're bypassing because of the vagueness of our terms that don't point to what's really going on. The word trauma points to how we're missing this. So we've been programmed, many of us, to these concepts, non-duality, whatever they say. And so when new concepts come along, the mind goes, how does that fit into that? You have to come to direct experience. In direct experience, what you'll see is that the conditioning that I'm talking about that holds emotion back for safety is part of the ego mechanism. It's just really buried. So your story, that's not really the root of your suffering. The story is how you stay safe. Because with the story of past and future, there, it looks like you're going to survive. You're going to live and hopefully not die for a long time. The story is keeping you safe from down here. So when you're questioning story and identity, remember, that is there to keep you safe from feeling something down here. This is why you're not in your body. It's not safe. At least your system thinks that. So you identify with story. If we focus just on seeing that the story is not us, you're just seeing that something that is safer than repression is not you. That's all that you're seeing. Something that is simply safer than the buried sadness. You're seeing that that's not you. The real work, I think, goes to the buried sadness, the buried rage. Because again, that's what's helping to produce the identity. Does it make sense now why trauma and non-duality are the same? Essentially, the West has defined what our suffering is. In the East, we talk about suffering, ego, resistance. In the West, they talk about trauma, repression, shadows, other things. And I think that points more clearly to the unconscious aspect of ego, the dark matter. So this is programming that's unconscious. So what does trauma like that have to do with awakening? There's an unconsciousness here. I call it the dark matter of consciousness, but it's like dark matter in the sense it's like right here, but we can't see it. So when we talk about awakening, why wouldn't we awaken to what that is? See? So trauma that's hidden in the body, if we're going to say that we're awake, why do we say that we're awake but not to that? Why is that awake then? If there's trauma held in the body, and as part of my awakening process, I simply do not bring it into awareness, how can I say that I'm awake to that? See? Bamboozling ourselves. The trauma programming is actually ego programming held in the body. It's part of the separation experience. So, and you'll see that when you start making it conscious, the energetic sense of separation releases even more. Energetic, because you're holding all that energy in. So the contractions and the pain in your body that's created from trauma and repression creates the sense of separation too. So the feeling of separation in your body is trauma and repression. That me feeling is programming that's connected into the sensations that you can't see. That me feeling will continue for you in non-duality until it's embodied more. And there are many people through the years who they saw the initial seeing, like there's awareness here, things are coming and going, but there was a persistent me feeling of separation in the body. That to me is the non-dual bypass. That persistent me feeling is not just a feeling, it's a me feeling, but there's me thoughts there that are buried. And those thoughts are like, I cannot and will not feel this. I am not safe. I have to hold this back. I is ego. It's relevant to awakening. See, the fact that you guys don't see the conditioning doesn't change the thing. The fact that you can't see that there's a mind-body connection going on doesn't give you the license to say that it's not there. I mean, you can say it, but it's like, that just means you're unconscious. That doesn't mean you know the answer to that. And that's what I'm trying to invite people to do, is see it directly. Once you see it, you'll know that that has to be part of the awakening process, because that's governing your life, your responses, your reactions. It's behind addiction. It's really behind seeking, guys, because what is it why would we seek? What are we looking for? If it wasn't something that we don't want to feel, the me feeling in the body, that ends up being, depression, anxiety, addiction, but that me feeling that we're trying to escape. See, by seeking to try to get to some place, that's just more resistance to that repression. The moment we're turning towards future, like, when will this end? That is the resistance. That's the same me programming that says, I don't want to feel that. So I'm just going to seek. I'm going to go look. See that? So this is part of the awakening, to see that your seeking is coming because you don't feel comfortable in your own skin, in your own experience. Your body doesn't feel, you don't feel settled here. Fully settled through and through your entire experience. So that me feeling, see that? It doesn't make you feel settled here. Pay attention to the me feeling, because it can be behind a lot, including the seeking. Think about it though. Me feeling is right here. And the moment you start seeking, you're turning away from it. It's right here. The me feeling has programming right here with it. So the seeking mind, remember, story is safe, y'all. So the seeking mind that goes into story, that's just safe from having to feel that. It might not feel safe, because when you think about future, you might get nervous, or you might whatever, or past. But those emotions are not the rage if that's buried, see? So the story ultimately connects you or protects you from what you really don't want to feel, which would be your primary repression. Story has to go. That's not you, and that's also how you're staying safe. And then as the story goes, you have to look to see, are you still seeking? Because that, again, is you're trying to stay safe. It doesn't look like it, but think about it. Your programming, whether you see it or not, is like, I don't want to feel this. This is not safe. That's what it's actually saying. Whether you're aware of it doesn't matter. So I'm just telling you, it's there. That is going to be seeking, right? To get away from that. So if you follow that, you're literally just kind of following the resistance. You're just resisting it. But if you hear that mind that's seeking, you just watch it. It's going to point you back down to there's some sort of me feeling that doesn't feel comfortable. Explore that with third dimension KI. It has everything to do with awakening, you all. But embodied awakening, that's the thing. So if other teachings don't talk about embodied awakening very specifically, it can look like we're talking about a different thing here. All right, that's it, guys. I've enjoyed this. Have a little eyeshadow on still. Love you. See you soon.